Hey everyone! So one question I've been getting asked a lot is how do I choose pattern paper on the cards I use? Because if you've been watching my videos for a while, if you've been on my blog for any length of time, I use pattern paper on like 99% of the cards I use. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily planning on doing a video on this just because it's not really something I think about, I just do it. But I was putting together a card this morning. I'm going to start making a card right away, and I started pulling out pattern papers to use, and I realized there is kind of a method to what I do. And basically, first off, I always use, or again, 99% of the time, I always use my little 6x6 paper packs. I've got videos on how I store them, and if you've seen the video on how I store them, you can see I have tons of them. Nowadays, there's so many out there, and I have a bit of an obsession, so I have tons of 6x6 pattern paper collection. Some are retired, some are current, whatever. But yeah, that's one thing I do is when I'm making a card, I stick to one collection. I am not pulling pattern papers from this one, pulling papers from this one, and then mixing them together and making them match. I don't bother with that. If you're wanting to do that, kudos to you, knock yourself out. But for me personally, it's way easier to stick to one pack because the colors already coordinate, everything's done for you. And there's so many patterns in one pack that you don't need to use more than one. I've had people ask why I don't use 12x12. It takes up more space. That's the main reason. 6x6 takes up way less space. I can have way more variety and everything else contained rather than great big packs of 12x12 paper. Plus, the majority of companies that make the 6x6 packs, they've scaled down the size of the patterns. If you're ever in a store and you can compare, if you compare the size of a pattern on a 6x6 sheet to a 12x12, usually the pattern has been scaled down quite a bit, which works way better when you're doing cards because you don't want great big huge patterns. I'll actually get to that in a second. So anyway, I'm going to make a baby card. And yeah, this is the Olivia collection from Basic Gray. I don't know if it's available anymore. I've had it for a couple years, but I just like it for baby cards because it's kind of different color scheme than what, the pastel pinky colors for baby cards. So anyway, I'm planning on making my card. I always start off with a solid color. With these ones, I consider this a solid. Almost all Basic Gray packs have the, slightly distressed or whatever, but to me, this is my solid. You could use cardstock, whatever, but that's kind of my neutral, solid, whatever. And then I'm going to be using 3 different pattern papers. That is one other little thing I usually tend to do, is usually stick to about 3. Any more than that, it can usually get way too busy. Sometimes 2 will work, but usually I do 3 to get a good contrast. And my rule-ish of thumb, I don't like making rules. There are rules with art, but why follow them? Anyway, I usually start with a small pattern, something neutral. This is actually what I plan on stamping a sentiment on. So I looked for something with kind of a lighter pattern, not too busy, where the sentiment can pop. And then I also, even for just choosing a pattern, I choose something small and simple. So that's one of them. And then the second one I chose was this floral, kind of just large. Again, simple color, doesn't have all the colors in the collection. It's not too busy. So I've got those 2. And then the third pattern I chose was this one. It's more graphic. It's got the green in it. It just, because they all match, it complements it nicely, and yet it's a variety. So usually with my 3 patterns, I usually go for a small, a medium, and a large pattern. That's kind of the easiest way to explain it. Even though these 2 are kind of similar, yeah. So a small pattern, a medium pattern, and a large pattern. So then that way the 3 of them can play off nicely on each other, and then it just varies how you place it and whatnot. I'm not going to quite get into that right now because I haven't even started making the card. That'll be in another video when I actually show me making this card. But I actually went through some of my card stash, and I do have examples I can show. So, like this one, I chose pattern papers all from the same pack. The green one, that was considered my neutral. Then I've got this one I'd consider kind of the large pattern paper as my background. This one was my medium pattern. This one was my small pattern. So, just using them in smaller amounts, a larger one offset by a couple smaller ones, and then the smallest pattern, it all just works. So then I did the same thing with this card. I had 3 different pattern papers. These ones, even though they're all different colors, they don't have multiple colors in it, they're all from the same pack, they all complement each other. So I've got the smallest pattern. This one's almost a base, like solid, because it has just the lightest amount of pattern to it, hardly anything at all. And then my medium pattern and my large pattern. So I did that one. And then same thing with this card. These pattern papers were all from the same pack again. This one was closest to just a base. You know, it was tone on tone color, so not too busy so that the main image could pop. My large pattern, my medium pattern. So really, and then also things like this, I didn't use more than one pattern on this. I just used the one sheet of pattern paper, but I chose something with a really, really small scale, because anything, if I'd used a card, if I'd used a piece of pattern paper with great big hearts on it, you wouldn't be able to, one, you wouldn't be able to hardly see them because I only used such a small amount, and two, everything else on this card is like, you know, small images. So I wanted to keep the pattern paper small to complement that. So I hope that helps you guys. So here's another pack of pattern paper. This is just the Summer's End by Fancy Pants. If I was going to go make a card, I would do something like keeping this piece would be considered my neutral. I don't know if it shows in camera or not, but it's kind of got a distress, like a bluish color. And then I would use something like this stripe. That could be one of my patterns. And then if you wanted to use another stripe, you could do something like that. And even add that. You could go with all stripes. It would work. So it just depends too, like just different styles. Like I would keep this one horizontal, do this one vertically, this one horizontally, and maybe use that as my main image. You know, or you could go in a whole different way. And then an example of using patterns from this pack, I made this card. So I considered this one my large pattern, this one was my medium, and this piece was my small, and it already had that on there, and that's what I stamped the sentiment on. So, just another example. And then, last one I'll show for now. This card, this is all pattern paper, got a bunch going on here. I've got my small pattern, my medium pattern, and what I would consider my large pattern as my background. So yeah, sticking to about 2 to 3 different pattern papers on one card is as far as I go, especially when you're doing cards in this size. These are, like I always get asked that too, these are standard A2 size cards, so they're 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2. So when you're working on such a small surface, doing any more than 2 or 3 pattern papers, it can get really crazy really quickly. Like even this one is really busy, but it works. But if I was to add any more patterns to this, any more strips of pattern paper, anything, it would be a hot mess. So yeah, I hope that answered any questions you guys might have and help you out when it comes to choosing pattern paper to use on your cards. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!